then we can really start. So, thank you all for being here for my presentation, and welcome to the people here, of course, and also welcome to the people watching from the live stream. I really appreciate you tuning in. Like Manne said, this is a presentation of my graduation project. I'm Miriam Riefel, and my presentation is the concluding of my master's in interaction technology for the University of Twente. And this is a project I've been working on for the past year, come up with and carried out myself, being able to put all my passions, personal interests, academic interests in, in the scope of 1 year, coming to this project. So I'm really happy I get to talk to you about it once again in this presentation. Mind yourself, using an autistic psychological brain-computer interface to increase self-consciousness. All right, so what I'm going to be talking about is the research I've been conducting. But this is all around this project I've made called the Mind Yourself Experience, which is in this space with us, unfortunately not visible on the live stream, but it's this text, the installation that I made. So before we're diving into the research, I just want to show you what the installation is like, so you just have an idea what kind of concepts we're talking about. So this is the tent that I made. And I don't know if anyone has a peek inside, but we have with me my nice assistant, Nico here, wearing an EEG cap, going through the Mind Yourself experience right now. So what happens when you're lying inside this tent is you're crawling inside your own mind. How? Well, you're wearing an EEG cap, which is measuring your brain signals, and these brain signals are being acquired on a computer and translated to see how this person is feeling right now. And that is being translated to lights that are constantly changing, sounds that are constantly changing, so that you get to step inside your own mind. So that is the project and the installation that I've built to be able to research something about artistic psychological brain-computer interfaces. So I will structure the presentation just like I structured my research, starting with the research field and gap. So what other projects are out there, what knowledge is there, what knowledge was missing, where's the research gap, and how does my project fit into this? And the how, the methodology, how have I built this and what design choices went in there, and how did I shape the research around it, coming to the results, and finally, what did the results mean in terms of the research question and the grander scheme of things. All right, so first of all, an artistic psychological brain-computer interface, which I might also refer to as an APBCI. It's this type of installation where someone is feeling a certain way, they're experiencing mental states, they are being acquired by some sort of signal acquisition device, like the EEG, being processed, and from that we can extract features about someone, how they are feeling, and these can be projected into artistic outputs. So in this case, it's sounds and lights, but could also very well be virtual reality or some kind of robotic movement. So that's the field. And what I noticed when starting to do my research here is that loads of projects are situated in one specific disciplinary. So for example, in the arts, there is artists that have made really cool things, trying to explore a brain-computer interface as means to provoke, to show something. There is people in the field of technology that want to see how far they can draw controlling things with the brain. And there is people in the field of neuroscience that are trying to get the most accurate mapping from brain signals to mental states. But the master's in interaction technology is all about putting knowledge from all fields and putting them together. So this is also what I tried to do in my project, in interdisciplinary methodology. Furthermore, in these projects, we're talking usually about understanding how someone feels. And I have found that there's two main paradigms that are very often used either measuring mental engagement state. So these are values like how relaxed are you, how engaged are you, how focused are you, or using the paradigm for affective state. So this is explaining how you're feeling in terms of emotions, negative, positive, and how much energy goes into these emotions. And these are two separate paradigms that are not often combined. So that's what I try to do here. See if I can combine these to get a more holistic representation of mental states. Moreover, as many projects as there are in brain-computer interfaces, as many aims as there are, sometimes ill-defined, sometimes well-defined. And with this project, I'm focusing on something that hasn't been explicitly researched in combination with brain-computer interfaces, and that is self-consciousness. And making sure that there is a well-defined evaluation method to really see what results are we getting from this project or not. And that is the ground of my project, Mind Yourself, which brings me to the research question. How can an artistic psychological brain-computer interface, such as this one, increase self-consciousness? Self-consciousness here meaning how much time do you spend in self-reflection, and what insights does that offer you, and can you implement those in your life? Using real-time, continuous, multi-model representations. Loads of words. It's just saying something is changing continuously in real time with different types of modalities. So in this case, sounds and lights, representing how you are feeling. That's the research question. And how did I go about gaining knowledge on this research question? The methodology consists of two parts. Because I did the research, but before I could, I constructed the installation. So there is the methodological part I want to talk to you about the construction and about the research around it, starting with the former. So this graph is representing the building blocks that I used to design this installation. So on the left-hand side, you can see the 5 building blocks that make up all design choices. And on the right-hand side is the steps that needed to be undertaken for each building block. So for every part separately, I tried to first do research, then come up with a design and test it in isolation. So starting with the first one, the physical design. So that has landed on the thing that you're looking at, and it's built on some concepts built around crawling inside your own mind. So it's kind of shaped like this little tent that is intimate, that is an immersive space. It closes up in a dark room, and once you're in, I hope I can give some of you the chance after the presentation, it really feels like this little space by yourself. And it's also inspired by some features of the brain, like the fabric, which kind of symbolizes a neural network, and the LEDs inside that are connected like neurons connecting in the brain. So it has the symbolism of crawling inside your own mind. And then inside the technology, coming to how to get from EEG, this thing measuring your brain, giving loads of numbers in the computer, how to get to mental states. This I based on the state-of-the-art research that is there. Don't want to get into it because it's loads of neuroscience and I can't tell you about everything. But in the end, resulting from these numbers, I came to values for the mind that are both affective state, which you'll see soon, as well as mental engagement. All right, and then the computer knows how someone is feeling. If someone is sad, if someone is excited, etc. How do you translate that to, first of all, lights? What I did was use the measurements for relaxation, focus, and stress. And these correspond to saturations of blue, green, and red. So the more relaxed you are, the bluer the lights will become. And the flickering frequency is also determined by the level of stress. So the more stressed you are, the faster the LEDs will start flickering. And then, how does this translate to sound? I've muted it for you now, but usually in the experience you would be listening to a continuously changing soundscape. And this is the effective state that I was talking about, which you can see on the left side. So you measure it in terms of valence, which can be negative and positive, and arousal, which can be low and high. So for example, if arousal is really high, the energy of the emotion is really high, and it's really positive, that means super excited, etc. And this I mapped to features in music. I used concepts about theory of emotion and music. I used them to create sound samples to power this soundscape that I created. This means that if you're lying inside the tent and it's being measured that your feelings are more negative, then you will hear more minor chord progressions, more dissonance, slower, lower pitch, and vice versa for more positive. If the arousal is high, so the level of energy is high, then you'll be listening to more tracks at the same time. So more music happening, more variation, the feeling of it being busier, and the variation will be larger. And then tempo is also going to be higher if the stress is higher, and the volume is going to be louder if the level of excitement is louder. That's a lot of information, sorry, which is why I've created some examples so you can really see how this comes into play. Yeah, so back to my lovely assistant, Nico, lying in the tent. Going through some emotions right now. I'll just start up the algorithm like it was actually happening right now. So it starts with the acquiring of signals. And usually it's basically dark, so you would, the LEDs would be much more all over the place. But let's say Nico is feeling negative, the feelings are negative, but not necessarily active or passive. There is a high level of stress, there is a high level of focus. Well, then you would be coming to, it's not yet being acquired, but let me check. Yeah, so here we are. Now it's responding to the data that I've inputted about Nico. So you'll hear the sounds become higher because the stress level is higher. Especially if we're going to the next state. What if Nico is feeling really active, really tense, excited, not necessarily negative or positive, but you'll hear the volume's gotten louder, more sounds are happening. Can't really see the LEDs through the fabric, but they'll start flickering orange and become brighter. But maybe after doing some breathing exercise, some meditation, we come into a different state of mind, more positive, more relaxed, and this will be represented. And these more ambience like sounds, more harmonic, lighter, brighter tones, and the lights are flickering less, they are more chill because the focus and relaxation levels are higher. So this is kind of a walkthrough of what you might be seeing and hearing if you would be lying inside the tent. I'll just mute the sounds so we don't have to listen to it for the whole presentation. All right, so that's the installation. That's what I built. Onto how did I use it to actually learn something about APBCIs for self-consciousness. For that, we need to look at the experimental protocol that I designed. So I invited people to come over for experiments, people in my own network, and they went through this experience, also taking questionnaire and their EEG being recorded. However, not everyone went to the genuine experience, because what I wanted to see is there any effects happening from this experience? Are there any changes? And if so, do these changes occur because you are actually in an interactive brain-computer interface? So because you're looking at genuine outputs based on your own brain, or are you just feeling an effect because you're lying there by yourself in a tent for 10 minutes thinking about the questionnaire, or because of the mere belief that you're in an interaction, so the placebo effect. Hence, I made two groups for conditions. The experimental condition, which is the genuine experience, like I've explained it. So you are listening to sounds and lights based on your own brain, and the control condition, in which you are instructed exactly the same. So there's no suspicion, led to believe that you are in a genuine interaction, that actually everything that's happening around you is based on someone else's data shuffled around, so not interactive at all. So all participants were put through the same tests. In the end, I had 35 people coming over, mostly young people, mostly people associated to the university because they were from my own personal network, and 19 in the experimental condition, 16 in the control condition. And before going into the Mind Yourself experience, they took a questionnaire. First and foremost, measuring their level of self-consciousness. So for this, I use a questionnaire that was validated, that is measuring self-consciousness in two factors, self-reflection and insight, and combining this into a general score. So you can imagine questions like, I usually think about how I feel, or when I'm angry, I never know, and people rating these statements. Then I afterwards, in the post questionnaire, I also asked people what they thought of the experience, and before and after the experience. In the questionnaire, I asked how they were feeling, with several factors measuring their self-reported sensations. And of course, as I was using the EEG anyways, I've also recorded the EEG to have a picture of all the mental states that people went through during the experience, and the raw EEG. So these are all the results I had. I won't, for the rest of my talk, go into the EEG recordings, because that would be a hassle, and short story, nothing really quick results that are potentially interesting could be found there. So these help me get the results to understand what's happening in this installation, with the self-consciousness being the main data used to answer the research question. The other ones useful to get more insights to understand what's happening a little bit better. So that brings us to the third part, the results. All right, so starting with the questionnaire, and with self-consciousness. Did people feel more self-conscious after having been in the Mind Yourself experience? The score of taking a questionnaire in self-consciousness is between 40 and 60, usually averagely. And here you can see the two sub-factors: self-reflection, insight, leading into a general score for self-consciousness. Blue, the control condition, so the placebo condition. Brown, the experimental condition. And this graph is showing you the increase between after and before. However, on a score that is usually around 50 or so, these changes are not large. Even though you see a slight increase for the experimental group in self-consciousness and a slight decrease for the control group, these are not statistically significant changes. So I can't conclude from this that self-consciousness did increase or decrease for that matter. And looking at the self-reported sensations next. So this part of the questionnaire consisted of 14 factors, of which a few of them changed significantly between the before and after. People felt more relaxed, felt more connected, calmer, happier, and more balanced. However, there is not a significant difference between these factors changing between the control and the experimental condition. So for both groups, these effects were found. And then finally, what did people think of the experience? I asked afterwards 5 questions. Did you think it was ordinary or extraordinary? Tiring or vitalizing? Sorry about the little cover up here. Demotivating or motivating? Too short, too long? And did you perceive a connection between how you felt and what the artistic output was like? Rating between 0 and 4. So 2 being in the center of things. So people did think it was extraordinary rather than ordinary. And people found it particularly too short rather than too long. And interestingly, people did not necessarily see a connection between how they felt and what they were looking at and listening to. And this did not differ for the experimental and the control group, which is really something interesting, because half the people were listening to random sounds, looking at random lights, and felt about as connected to those as people in the groups that were actually listening to sounds and lights based on their own brain. What does that mean? That brings us to the final part of my presentation. What do these results say about the research question? What knowledge did we gain? So, interpreting the results. Like I said, could not conclude that there was a clear effect on self-consciousness in this experimental setting. That means that with all the design choices that I made, with the experimental protocol, with the questionnaire that I used, this did not lead to any significant results in self-consciousness. There were effects on sensations. However, they did not differ significantly between the 2 conditions. So where does this lead us to the research question? It means that we don't have a definite answer. You never really do with this kind of research. It does seem to be that there is some kind of effect, but not in self-consciousness right now as the way I've measured it. And I want to talk to you about some different reasons why that might be the case, some limitations that I can assign in my own study. So first of all, the experimental setup has some limitations. The participants were people from my personal network, so that brings a bias from being associated to the university mostly, from being young mostly. This may bias how people are or are not already self-conscious. And what I also want to mention here is the questionnaire that I have used. If you want to see it fully, it's also in the printed research. But it contained questions like, I always think about how I feel. I never understand this. And these are questions regarding habits. And habits don't change in the scope of half an hour. So it may be the case that this questionnaire, although it is measuring a validated concept, might not be the right fit for this type of one-time experience. And thirdly, I made the construct myself, and I explained all the design building blocks that were there. I have a nice flowchart for you again, just to overwhelm you with the amount of words and blocks and arrows that are on this picture, making my point. All of these are places in which there may be design flaws. It consists of so many novel concepts that it's impossible to identify exactly maybe whether people weren't feeling sad when the computer thought they were feeling sad because the mental state mapping was off, or maybe they were feeling sad, but this really didn't correspond to the music that they were hearing, for example. So these are all places that I didn't test in isolation, but that could bring potential flaws. Same for the experimental protocol and the evaluation. Finally, I want to talk to you about the value of my study and where to go from here. Like I've said, we don't have a clear answer to the research question. What I think where the value really lies is also in these building blocks that I showed you. They are points of inspiration. They are novel methodologies of doing it this way because, for example, controlling this soundscape interactively like I've done and combining all these different softwares, these are methods that did not exist, that I made in the name of this research and this installation. And I think these types of methods and ideas that I'm pointing out in my research are really a point of inspiration for future studies. And it would be absolutely amazing if there could be a full PhD dedicated to mapping something like emotion to music and really understanding what the best way is to understand EEG data in a short time period like this. These are questions that deserve the attention of years and years and years. So I hope that it's stepping points that I'm offering to the field. And I think if there is also a fitting evaluation method that is validated in this regard, this could bring out the potential that this type of project has. And I want to clarify the value with my final slide, which is just 2 responses I picked up from people, because talking to everyone during the experiments, reading the reviews that people wrote, talking about it with friends, it's meaningful to people, I've noticed. One said it was mind-opening, I felt more in touch, felt calmer, it was empowering, it was guiding. And someone else said it was extraordinary, amazing, mindful, and really felt the analogy of crawling inside this little space by themselves. And there are many more responses that are like this. You can also find them the very last pages of the research. This and my whole experience is telling me that there is something there that can be meaningful, that has already been proven to be meaningful. And I think if the time is taken to explore these building blocks, the limitations, the potentials that I'm suggesting in the discussion, then there is a future for artistic, psychological, brain-computer interfaces to help people understand themselves a little bit better, to take time to think about themselves, and to learn how to mind yourself. Thank you.
Thanks for your presentation. Yes. And of course, now it's time for questions. Who wants to kick off from the audience?
I also, if you're curious, I put up some more responses that I, of course, cherry-picked.
Yeah.
But you can find the full list in my research.
I would say normally the positive ones probably.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, because not all of them were like this.